Hi, everyone. I'm Lem Malabuyo, host of From the Hangar podcast, a podcast that is produced by Missionaries Aviation Fellowship. And when we started this thing 2 years ago, we wanted to talk about people of MAF and not necessarily about MAF. So if you guys were wondering what it's like for a pilot outside of the cockpit living in a place overseas, or what it's like for a mother who is homeschooling their children in a missionary context, this was kind of the podcast for you. And so as we are nearing the end of our second year, we wanted to hear from you guys what your feedback is on what we're doing, whether that's what you guys want to see on the podcast, what you don't want to see on the podcast. Is this plant even helping this set? Those are the kind of things I want you guys to talk to me about. So leave a comment in the comment section below, or email me at podcast@maf.org. That would be wonderful. I would love to hear what you guys think about this, and I really appreciate you guys listening or watching this podcast. It's been a lot of fun for me to be the host of this past year, and so any feedback to make me be a better host and to help guide this podcast into something that you guys will really enjoy going into 2025, I would love that. And then lastly, if you guys listen to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, or that's Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or anything, we'd love to have you guys leave a review. 4 or 5 stars, anything below. You don't have to leave a review. Don't worry about that. But a positive review would be really great. And so, yeah, let's get back into the beginning of this next episode. And I'm looking forward to hearing back from you guys. Thanks. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 19 of From the Hangar. We are sitting in a hangar. And that's one of the really cool things about this podcast, is that we get to do this where there's lots of planes in here, and we get to ask the hangar guys if we can just build a set every once in a while and do this really cool thing and learn about those who are missionaries and those who are affiliated with Mission Aviation Fellowship. So with that said, I am sitting here with Dave and Jill Holmes, and I'm going to let them tell like who they are and where they serve and all that. So let's just get into it, shall we? So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell me your guys' roles and where you serve and how long you've been with MAF.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Dave Holmes, and I serve as a pilot and a mechanic in Mozambique, Africa. In January, we will have been there with MAF for 14 years, wow, and in Mozambique for 13.
And I am Jill, and I serve as MAF US's security manager. So I'm cool. A weird in the sense that I live in a field program in Mozambique, and I actually work for headquarters.
There's the beauty of remote jobs now.
Teams,
super cool.
Zoom, it works.
Yeah, that way we don't have to ask you guys as a married couple to work in 2 different locations, because
that's hard on a marriage.
Although I travel quite a bit, and I come back to HQ, and they're like, "Are you sure you're married?" And I'm like, I swear, we're good.
You really do have a husband?
I do. Here he is.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that was the running joke, is that this time around, Dave, you came in and you stood up in chapel and said that.
Yeah, I think they needed to quell the rumors, so they sent me out this time.
Yeah.
Really, we're starting furlough, so Jill did need to teach a course here last week, but I tagged along this time, and then
took the
this
course.
Coming week we start our furlough.
Took the course, but you're a real person, so that's congratulations, Jill.
Yeah,
really cool.
I know. I have a real husband. I didn't just pretend.
Okay, cool. So, but you guys mentioned that you guys have been with MAF for 14 years, but you guys kind of have a unique journey into MAF. Like that wasn't your career, or that wasn't what you guys did from the very get-go as young 20-year-olds, as a lot of missionary families do with MAF. So, why don't you guys tell me, what were you guys doing before you were with this organization?
Yeah, so we both have a natural resources background by education. And so we met at Texas Tech University. We were in the same range, wildlife, and fisheries department. So I was a range management major, and Jill was wildlife management. So we were on the 2 ends, the plants and the animals. And both of us pursued a career in that. We were looking at missions shortly after college, but Jill is the brain of the family. I had school loans, so I brought a lot of debt to the marriage, and we worked on paying off debt initially, and so just pursued our careers. I worked for the U.S. Geological Survey for 9 years and did water resources work.
Whoa.
And then Jill?
I worked for 3 different Department of Transportations doing like environmental impact analysis for road construction projects.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah,
Well, let me ask you guys, like, going into natural resources as like a career, like, and majoring and all that, like, why did you guys decide that that was what you wanted to do, like, going into college?
I just have a real appreciation for God's creation and enjoyed science. And so it was just like a way to, and man, my job in the States, it was pretty fun because if it was a beautiful day, I had a project to get out to. And if it was freezing cold or burning hot, there's plenty of report writing to do. So didn't have to sit behind a desk on a nice, pretty day. So, but yeah, just appreciation for God's creation.
That's cool.
Sure.
So mine was a little bit different. So I think when I was in junior high, I came up with this plan that I eventually wanted to work for the Forest Service and hopefully in the field of aviation. So when I went into college, I was just pursuing a degree that would qualify me to work for Forest Service. And then I had aviation training, in my mind in the future, but initially had just a degree that would get me in the Forest Service was my plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then, like you guys said, you guys met in college, and
Yeah, we have a kind of a unique story there.
oh, perfect. I
It's,
want to hear this. Yes.
So I'm about 4 years older than Jill. So I had started a master's degree program when she came along as an undergraduate student. And I was involved in Baptist student ministries back then. Not sure what they call it now. But anyway, one evening, her and her sister attended Texas Tech as well. So I saw them come into the worship service that evening, and I had seen Jill around, so I was interested. But when she showed up at the student ministry deal, I took it as my chance to go talk to her. And so I was a graduate student that was teaching a class that every single undergraduate in our department would eventually have to take. So I was chatting with Jill about this and telling her that, one of these days you'll be in that class. And I think it was maybe a few weeks later, a month later, something, I called Jill and asked her out. And her sister told her that you need to be really careful because this guy could end up being your teacher someday. And she was like, look, we're just going to lunch. It's not like I'm going to marry the guy. And I can't remember how many, is like 2 years later,
but
maybe.
we were engaged
We
by
were
the time
engaged
I was
by
in
the
his
time.
class. Yeah.
And I did ask all the other professors if there's a conflict of interest here, I'm willing to step down. And they were like, we know you, so not a big deal. So.
And how did that class
I
go?
made an A.
Oh, you did. Yeah, because of your hard work. Right?
Exactly.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
No special treatment. In fact, I was so terrified that people would think that there was a conflict of interest that I wouldn't look at Jill during class. I would hardly ever, ask her
interact, yeah.
questions. And there wasn't a lot of females in the departments, but she said initially people knew that I was engaged to someone in the class, but they didn't know who. And gradually throughout the semester, they would figure out that it was Jill. So, but I tried really hard not to let that be known.
That's awesome. I love that. Thanks for telling us. This is great. That's great. And I'm sure all the undergrads just appreciated that that guy in the master's program was dating an undergrad. Like, oh gosh, how can we compete with that? Like, you can't. Sorry. That's great. Okay, so then, like, how you said you mentioned aviation. I'm guessing that is kind of where that began, your guys' time going into MAF, or like what was that transition?
Well, aviation for me was kind of a childhood passion. I had one of my grandfathers served on an air crew in World War II, and he always wanted either one of his sons or grandsons to get involved in aviation. So he kind of nurtured that passion in me from as far back as I can remember. And it wasn't until, let's see, we had been married maybe 3 years, I think, before I got my private pilot license. And at that point, didn't really see aviation in a career future. It's like life directed us different ways, but it was still something that I wanted to do. So I did it for several years, just more or less as a hobby.
Okay.
And it was always strange to me because aviation is so expensive, and I never could resolve the cost of it, as a hobby.
Right, yeah.
It's like it just didn't make any sense. But I loved it. And we had some life circumstances that God was kind of moving us in a different direction. We weren't quite sure if it was like a different location within our careers, like to a different office, or maybe change careers altogether. And we met with our Sunday school teachers, their family. They were kind of like mentors to us at the time, and we told them some ideas we had, and even considering like going into full-time missions, but didn't really know how God would use us in foreign missions, because I am not a preacher or
right.
that is just, God did not gift me with things like that. So it was kind of how could God use me in the mission field? And they said, hey, we hear your passion for missions. We've heard you talk about aviation. Have you ever heard of MAF? And they're like, no. And she was homeschooling her children, and she had just finished a little curriculum segment about MAF. So she gave us a book, and we got online and discovered that most of the mission aviation organizations require the pilots to be mechanics as well. So that felt like, okay, that would be a first step, as we would need to get those qualifications. So we called around to some different schools around the country and ended up going to Michigan, School of Missionary Aviation Technology, SMAT. And I was there for a little over a year. I also had to do some more pilot licensing, things like that, and then build some hours, different hours in the aircraft. So that's kind of what took us into aviation with missions.
Wow.
And we had some great, like God gave us some real confirmation, like markers, that it was a calling. It wasn't just like a new adventure or a whim or something like that. I'll give you one example. So when we met with our Sunday school teacher, this was on my birthday. It was on Easter, the week of Easter in 2008. And so we were traveling to my mom and dad's the very next day to go spend Easter with the family. And I have a real close friend from high school that's serving in missions in Brazil. So Dad says, hey, Tiffany was at the church this past week and spoke to the church, and he said, you would never guess what she said. And I was like, what'd she say? And he said, they have a huge need for pilots in the mission field. I was like, well, since you mention it, Dad, Jill and I have just made a decision to leave our careers and pursue service in mission aviation. And then there were a few other very similar markers that God just really made it clear that I'm guiding you on this path.
That's awesome. And Jill, what was that? So for you, and like throughout all that, everything that Dave just summarized, like what was there any conversations about like, hey, like I could do this in the mission field, or for you as well? I mean, for you, Jill.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually one thing that made me really nervous. We don't have kids, so I wouldn't be the normal kind of stay at home or homeschool or that kind of thing. So I was like, what am I going to do? Because I'm not a pilot or a mechanic. So how, and just got some encouragement from some of our mentors of like, God's it's a clear calling. God's going to find, like, he's going to show you. And when we got to Mozambique and we finished language school, there was a hole in our program, just some folks departing. And I had never taken a finance class in my life, but I was helping with books and invoicing and some of the operation scheduling, whatever was needed, just filling a hole. And what's kind of neat is later those skills got put to use when I joined the global disaster response team, because all of those things are kind of, can you do that stuff? Can you set that stuff up on the fly,
yeah.
in the middle of a disaster response? And without that experience, I wouldn't have been able to have that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And so that kind of helped me on my own journey into to MAF. And that at that time, the manager of disaster response was also the security manager. So that got me in that direction too.
Okay, cool. Oh man, that's awesome. Okay, so we're gonna fast forward now, because I mean you kind of just started talking about Mozambique and MAF and all that stuff. So you guys joined MAF, and that was well and good. And like, so then what year did you guys get assigned somewhere? Was it Mozambique that, like, you guys were assigned Mozambique and nowhere else? Okay. So what year did you guys go out there?
January 2012
Yep.
is when we got there.
Okay,
Yeah.
sweet. Can you guys tell me in the audience, like, what kind of things does the program in Mozambique do? Like, who do they serve and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we're a little bit unique of a program in Mozambique, because the government required us to be a licensed business in Mozambique if we were going to operate there. So we're essentially like a charter airline. So we do a wide variety of different flights. So sometimes it's serving different businesses that work in remote locations. Sometimes we're flying tourists. We do get involved sometimes in flights in support of government, like I've flown ministers of education and the Ministry of Health and just various roles like that. And then we also have mission projects. MozMed is like the bread and butter of our program.
Yeah.
And what it involves is flying medical teams into very, very remote areas that wouldn't have access to doctors and dentists and things of that nature.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay, sweet. And so, oh man, how can I? So there's, I mean, like, you basically, like, describe, like, the MozMed team ministry in, like, this 1.5 sentence summary. But, like, I mean, I was there with you guys on that program, like, just this past summer, and man, that thing was incredible. Like, it was like this huge, I guess it was just like this huge chunk of the country as far as geographically, and MAF is able to connect to these villages that are in those areas with these medical teams. And so it's like, yeah, it's like a quick summary type thing, but it impacts so many, like, thousands and thousands of people, and it's just so cool. And it was definitely a highlight of my time out there visiting you guys and filming that kind of stuff. So, but one of the unique things about that MozMed team is that they fly into a reserve. Is that correct? And
yeah. So it's like, you might think of it as a national park. It's a wildlife reserve. It's called the Niassa Special Wildlife Reserve. It's in the far northern part of Mozambique. It actually borders Tanzania. They say it's about the size of Switzerland, 190 miles wide roughly, and about 80 miles north to south. So it's a really huge wildlife reserve. It's very wild, has all the traditional African safari type animals, with the exception that we don't have rhino and we don't have giraffe. And there might be one other that kind of traditional, but I mean, we have the lion, zebra, Cape buffalo, all those kind of wild animals. And it's unique in that while it is a reserve, it also has villages in it.
Yeah.
So around the world, most wildlife reserves would be absent of people. So that makes this one very, very unique in that there are still villages living within the reserve, and it becomes as far as conservation, it becomes unique in that the people that live within the reserve, they have to, embrace the conservation aspect of the wildlife, because that is it's a priority of the government in establishing this as a reserve area, but also understanding what the benefits of the natural resources there are to their village. And so frequently, I mean, if you're living among elephants, for example, and you're living as a subsistence farmer, so you plant your garden that's going to sustain you throughout, you and your family throughout the year, and an elephant comes through and destroys your garden like in one day, your concept of elephant wouldn't be like us that go to a zoo and are just like amazed that God created this awesome animal. So the conservation organizations that serve there to manage different areas of the reserve, they really try to involve the communities and try to educate them on how these resources are so special, like just for tourism. I mean, that's one example, but people pay thousands of dollars to go on a safari to the Nyasa Reserve. And if the communities can learn better ways to live within the natural resources, for example, one of the villages you and I visited, they dug I think it's like 2 meter deep trench all the way around this village. And it was even highlighted in a National Geographic article, I think 2023. But the elephant won't cross that trench. So that makes their gardens within that perimeter safe. Now they can live comfortably within that environment, but they also get to benefit from the tourists coming in and things of that nature. So it's really a cool symbiotic relationship.
It is. And I think that's one of the things I really appreciated, because we did some interviews with some of the directors there, the conservation director of one of those, I guess, organizations, or and I was hearing like examples of that kind of thing where we don't, essentially their main goal is to help these animals thrive and and keep them safe, but at the same time, the reality that you tell a Mozambican family that's struggling to put food on the table that they need to take care of these animals around them, like their number one priority is to get food on the table. Like they're not going to care. They couldn't care less about the animals if they can't feed their children, right? So they want to make sure that they take care of the people who are in those reserves just as much as taking care of the animals, because it's like this, I guess, symbiotic relationship. And I think that was really neat, because these aren't necessarily Christian organizations. These aren't necessarily believers of Jesus who are there, but they care deeply for the world and for the animals there, and they also they want to care deeply for the people, because they're important. So I just thought it was just a really neat perspective that we don't necessarily hear a lot from other programs, and it's just really cool that MAF in Mozambique gets to do that. So that's just really cool. And Jill, have you ever gone to the reserves?
I have. I'm always a little jealous because Dave comes back. I'm like, "What'd you see?" I saw a herd of buffalo from the air, or an elephant came in the camp, and that's like, oh, I wish I was there. I've tagged along. I can't go in the Mosmed fights because you always want to save weight if they're bringing patients back to the hospital. So you don't want to take a seat from a potential patient. But I have tagged along when we did. There was a pangolin that had been poached, and they took it back to reintroduce it back into the wild in the reserve, and a couple other times. And we did a vacation once, and for a few days in the reserve, and
dude,
it was
that's
pretty
awesome.
awesome. You can drive in a park like in the Kruger in South Africa or wherever, and you're on these paved roads, but in Nyasa, it's like you know that you are in their world. They're not, these animals are not in your world.
Yeah.
You are in theirs, and it's so remote. You can hear the lions in the distance and the hippos. And so to get so up close in their environment, and we did a canoe trip on the river.
Oh man.
And when the river's real wide, you can be like, oh, there's a crocodile over there, and it's like, it's safe distance from me, but I can see it. But the river would get a little bit more narrow, and you would watch the hippos come up, and then the hippos would go into the water, and that's like, where are the hippos? So it was a little nerve wracking, and Dave's just filming, and I'm like, Dave, you got to paddle, like there's hippos up there. So it was so awesome. It's just a remarkable, beautiful, beautiful place.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
That's
and
great.
I think one really cool thing about our relationship with the conservation groups is over the years, starting with the family that's started the Mozambican program with MAF, years and years of relationship building with these conservation groups, and without those relationships, we need those partnerships to be able to do the MOSMED project. So the medical work, bringing in Christian medical teams and building relationships that allow us to eventually hopefully share the love of Christ in a way that's tangible after we're serving physical needs. It wouldn't happen without those relationships with these groups.
Right.
So it's just it's a neat way of all of that just coming together to hopefully grow God's kingdom.
Yeah. Actually, that is something that we probably should know. I think it's okay to ask, like, what is the, I guess the environment is what I'm thinking of. Like the people there, like, what is their, do they have a religious, is there a religion that is majority there?
Yeah, so the villages where we're going are almost 100% Muslim.
Okay. Yeah.
They also are animistic usually, so they're mixing traditional
like paganism or something like that.
Yeah, that kind of thing
into the Islamic
and
beliefs.
that's actually quite common throughout Mozambique. Is even on the Christian side, if someone professes to be Christian, often there is a mixture of the tradition as well, and so it's really hard to leave that lifestyle behind.
Right.
Different cultural aspects, but yeah, so it is a unique area where we're going into Muslim areas, and we're meeting physical needs, and we're trying to develop relationship and gain trust over a long period of time.
Yeah.
It's very slow progress.
Yeah.
It's a long-term mission.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those, it speaks to kind of, I guess, the commitment of I guess missionaries around the world, where if they don't see, like, quote unquote fruit of their labors, that, like, oh, we haven't, someone has come to Christ in so many years, is this really working? It's like, well, no, like there is a need there, and we're meeting it, and we'll pray for them, and hopefully they'll come to Christ, but they need medical care. They need their teeth to be looked at. They need their eyes to be looked at, and that kind of stuff. And we're not gonna just serve them. We're not gonna serve them only because they become Christians. Like, we need them.
Yeah.
We need to serve them because they have needs. And I think that's one of those really cool things.
And like Jill just briefly mentioned, like, we're trying to earn the right to share the gospel with them, and there's a few of the villages that we're really hopeful this coming season. And MOSMED only goes through the dry season. So during the rainy season, the airstrips become too soft for the aircraft, and it also becomes too difficult for the conservation organizations to maintain, like cut the grass on the airstrip and things like that. So we're only able to operate during the dry season. So this coming season that will start about April, a few of the village elders have already given us some permission in some locations to show the Jesus film. So that's
Oh, wow.
I think we're 6 years into MOSMED in the Nyasa Reserve, and so this is a really exciting
That is
development
really
for us.
exciting.
And
Yeah.
I will say, it's a little bit obvious what the medical team does on a MOSMED trip, and it's usually consists of a doctor and a dentist, a nurse, and then we take an ophthalmologist. And usually the dentist and ophthalmologist will alternate which villages they go to depending on the needs. The pilot, we just kind of hang out at the airplane, so the medical team goes off into the village and we'll stay at the airstrip with the airplane. And that gives us some really unique opportunities. So you can imagine when an airplane flies over a remote village, the kids, it perks their interest. So depending on the size of the village, there could be dozens or hundreds of kids, running to the airstrip when we fly over. And a lot of the kids will just hang out with the pilot at the airstrip like all day. So it usually ranges anywhere from like 2.5 to 5 hours for the medical team to do their work. And so, we have a captive audience with these kids for that long. And it's also unique in that while the official language in Mozambique is Portuguese, there's something like 42 different traditional languages. So where we're serving in Nyasa, they have their traditional tribal language. But because of their proximity to Tanzania, their trade language is usually Swahili rather than Portuguese. So when the kids get older and start in, I think it's maybe kind of like junior high age, they start learning some Portuguese. So Portuguese would be like their third language. So it's not something they use in daily conversation. So even for us pilots, it's kind of hard to find one of the kids that really speaks Portuguese well. And we don't speak Portuguese that well either. So it's difficult to do verbal communication. So we play games with the kids sometimes,
that's awesome.
and the pilot usually will walk the airstrip at some point just to kind of check the condition, and maybe a warthog was rooting around and dug a little hole and we can cover that up or something. And the kids a lot of times will walk the airstrip with us.
Oh.
And one of the neat things that just happened this past season, usually when I get to the end of the airstrip, the kids know that, okay, we're done with that. They've started taking me on little adventures. So one time they took me off into the bush to an old abandoned, like colonial era military thing that, it's just ruins now, but it's like that. I didn't even know that was in the, out in those trees. And then one time they took me down to the village, the river that runs alongside the village, about about 1.5 miles down, a trail. And so it's cool that the time that we have spent as pilots with those kids over the years, we're seeing like a different level of trust that they have in us to let us, participate in things like that with them. And they do some funny things like most Mozambicans don't have a lot of body hair. So kids, as we're walking the airstrip, they'll rub my arms, feeling the hair on my arms, and they compete on who gets to hold my hand as we walk along. So normally each hand, you've got kids holding your hand on each side, and another kid will come and knock the kid's hand off, and so they kind of compete that way. But it's really cool.
That's cool. Well, speaking of kids, because I did want to I want Jill to talk about kind of how she has her, like, you have like a passion of yours that you kind of brought into MAF before you, like, that you had before MAF, and you kind of like are starting to do that with children as well. Like, do you want to talk about that? Oh,
Sure.
goodness.
Yeah. No. So long before we moved to Mozambique, I taught martial arts, trained. So I always like wherever I'm at, if you want to train, if you teach, you'll have chances to train and stuff. But so since we've been there, I've taught mostly kids. I've had ladies classes for a short time. I taught at an orphanage. Right now, I've got a ladies class and then a small group of us, and then kids, and it's really neat. It's missionary kids, some of the local Mozambicans that live nearby. It's very multicultural. We've got kids from Brazil and the UK and Americans and Mozambicans all in a nice little mix, and it's fun because I've had kids that started when they were little bitty, and now they're bigger and taller than me, and I'm like, don't hurt me, like as we train. But it's super fun, and there's not a lot of structured activities, especially the missionary kids that come from the U.S. or somewhere where you might have clubs upon clubs that you can do. They have the pickup soccer games and stuff, but I've been able to teach the curriculum and help them earn their next belt and kind of go through, something that has progression, so, and it's super fun for me. I love it. It's a great group.
That's cool. And so, and like, again, like you said, it's like, it's all sorts of people from different backgrounds, and like you said, like MKs or people like Mozambicans who just live there, and like, so I'm guessing some of these people aren't in Christian homes, or some of them may have like Muslim homes and stuff like that. And so, like, is there opportunity there as well to kind of show like the love of Jesus to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because we have the principles that go with martial arts anyway, where you're talking about self-control and integrity and stuff, and you can always insert that in. And we do have, I've got a young man that's Muslim that participates in our class, and just being surrounded by a bunch of other kids that are missionary kids, in an environment where we all care and respect for each other while we're doing something that you could actually hurt someone if you don't, is great. And so it's not, I wouldn't say it's exactly ministry where we're talking Bible during class or whatever, but I think it's a great opportunity, little bits and pieces, for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh man. Yeah. So it's, again, like, I should probably say that, like, a couple episodes ago on this podcast, I interviewed some Basutu men, like, from the Sutu, and I probably should like connect that after we were in the Sutu, Jennifer and I, we went out to Mozambique, and that's why I'm talking and referencing like this trip back in the summer that I got to like hang out. And so I pretty
much told him, you can't come and just take pictures. You gotta like join in the fun. And so you were a good sport.
Yes, Jennifer and I went and attended that. The first Friday we were there, we like attended the kids. And then did Jen?
She came the second time.
She came the second time. Yeah. Was it just the kids, or was it the women's class?
I think she just came to the kids class again. Class. Yeah.
And I was quote unquote busy because we ended up going to the Niassa Reserve for a second time.
Checking out the lions while we were.
That's what I say too, Liam. Is I'm busy, so I always tell people back when she first started and she was a white belt, it was kind of fun when she would come home and like, let me show you what I learned. But after white belt, it wasn't.
Some of those kids are like, and we're not talking like, fourth grade children.
No,
like,
there's some of them in their 20s and teens. You know,
so
most of them are bigger than me now. Yeah, even the ones that are like 14.
Doing drills and sparring a little bit with them is like, oh, this hurts a little bit. Like, if you don't do the move right or you don't block correctly, like this is a little painful. So, but that's okay. It's like we need a little bit of beating up, I guess.
We all do. Yeah. It's stress relief.
Yeah.
And humility.
Yeah. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. But you did also, Jill, you also teased that you were part of like the disaster response team here at MAF. That kind of like led you into being in a role for security as well. But like maybe like start with the disaster response, because actually I don't know that story, like, because you were talking about helping with some of the books with the Moz program, and Like, how did that turn into disaster response?
It's to take one step back. Dave referenced where we had to become a commercial business in Mozambique, and we got grounded for like 9 months. And I actually I decided to go back to school, and I did a master's degree online, and I did international security studies.
Oh, really?
And so I reached out to our director of disaster response and security, and I was like, I did this thing. I live in Mozambique. Like, I don't know if it's useful.
Well, wait, before you continue on, like a master's in international security, like what? That seems very specific. Like,
I know. I was like,
what?
why did I do that?
Okay.
And I even told Dave, I'm like, I'm not sure why I'm doing this, but if I like it, I'll keep doing it, and if I don't, I'll just take the couple classes I want, and I can quit, you know.
Yeah.
And it took me 3 years to get through because that was like 2 classes at a time, but I finished. And the disaster response team was looking for someone that kind of had some of the skill set that I had developed working with the program in Mozambique. So I went and trained in South Sudan, and I went to Bangladesh and helped with some flooding. And but over time, I was allowed to would you like to help own the security training that we do for our staff that travel overseas and help prepare the contingency plans and things like that. So it opened the door to serving more on that side of things as well. So yeah, it was just kind of an interesting journey that I wasn't expecting. And
well,
here I am.
That is, it's kind of wild to think about that, because like just hearing you even like 25 minutes ago talk about when you guys were even figuring out if you want to go into the field, like
What am I going to do?
What am I going to do? And
and the Lord provided
like
something.
And it's like a very specific thing too, which is just really cool. Like that's really needed, right? Like that is like those are some realities about going to some of these countries, right?
Yeah.
Like, and now you're there, like you were the person that God was preparing not only for yourself but like for an organization as big as MAF. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I just think it's neat how God, without me really even understanding the path, that there was a path in a way that I can serve MAF not being a pilot or a mechanic or a teacher, and yet still have a place to serve. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that is so cool. Okay, so I'm gonna bring it home a little bit here, because like Dave, even yourself, right? Like when you guys were thinking about going overseas, not quite really knowing what that would look like, and then someone's like, have you guys even thought about like aviation and missions together at MAF and all this stuff? And so what I'm trying to say is that a lot of mission work and those who are a part of missions don't really fall under that like conventional like Bible translator or pastor or church planter, or something that's like very directly ministry, right? If someone was in your shoes that's like really trying to explore this but really is struggling to figure out what they can do overseas, like what would you say to that person?
Well, I would encourage them that our experience overseas has kind of enlightened us, looking at even different organizations that we serve beside. There's people that do logistics with like construction. There's people that, just keep a base running. So, I mean, there's people that do electrician stuff and plumbing, and there's people that do IT, even MAF. We've got a pretty good IT department, but all these organizations need skills that aren't necessarily direct ministry related. With the world we live in today, there are so many things that have to come together to keep it operating. And so there's lots of different.
Yeah, it's one of the neat things about living overseas is, I mean, the instant connection with other partner organizations. It's like Dave might help fix a missionary's washing machine or something, and they're helping us with cultural touch points where we don't speak Makua and they do, or some, some things. It's the way the body of Christ should be, right? We aren't all gifted in the same things, and it's neat that MAF has a path for those gifted in different ways to serve alongside those that are doing what you might consider traditional missions.
Yeah.
And I mean, teachers, you can use martial arts, right? I mean, there's just so many different ways. It's pretty cool. Like how we all have our giftings that the Lord can use.
That's cool. Thanks, guys. I love that. Okay, so on the list of questions that I wrote to you guys and said there was like that little bit that says like rapid fire questions, and normally I do that with people, but there were some like very tangible examples of what you guys like to do on your free time already that we experienced. So I'm just gonna ask, like, what are some of the things that you guys like to do on your free time in Mozambique? I guess in Mozambique, maybe.
So you got to experience something that most folks living in northern Mozambique probably don't, because Dave and I, for whatever reason, we bought some fencing equipment, and we got to watch the Olympics in our living room and see a family member of yours in the Olympics.
Yes.
But we watched a little bit of fencing too. But we have this fencing equipment, so if you're going to come to our house, you might get a chance to just do some living room sword fighting.
Yeah, we'll push the couch and the chairs out of the way.
Yep. And make sure you got to wear the helmet and the whole 9 yards, so you'll lose an eye. But it's super fun.
That was one of the most random things about me visiting. Like, I've had many MAF families host us like while my travels to these different programs, like, and fencing is probably one of the top random things that a family has shown us that they were a part of.
We're a little strange, but
but it was also
but you know,
really
if people
awesome.
Come, it's like, hey, you want to do a thing in the living room? So we've had the president of MAF fence in our living room. So
man, so
we've got pictures if you want them.
So I was really tempted, like some of the wild ideas about this podcast. I was like, should I just hide like fencing equipment behind the couch and then just like pull it out like at the end of this episode and then we'll just do a fencing match or something? Like that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
Actually, I think of all the people that have fenced in our living room, you had the most skill. So I'm just saying.
Yes. It was. I wrestled in high school, so yeah.
You know,
it totally
it translates or something.
Of course. But it was super fun. The fencing was fantastic, and it was exhausting too.
Yeah, it's like 30 seconds, and you're huffing.
Yeah,
it makes you watching the people in the Olympics that go for minutes on end. You're like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. So, and that was fun actually watching the Olympics with you guys.
It was.
Yeah, that was great.
We had a special moment with you watching Olympics.
I know. I was like,
maybe you should explain that.
So Jill mentioned that a family member of mine was in the Olympics. Emma Malabuyo. She competed,
Go Emma.
Yeah, she competed in she's like a gymnast, a
female
female gymnast.
Yeah,
in the Olympics, which already is incredible. But she competed for the Philippines and was an alternate in the previous Olympics for the U.S. team. So,
that was awesome.
When Simone Biles stepped down, I was like,
and she's in.
Is Emma gonna be the person? Is she gonna be the one? And she wasn't. It was some other chump. I mean, just kidding.
A very talented person, you mean? Yeah.
Oh, we'll edit that one out. That was a little aggressive. But yeah, no, I actually really appreciate you guys and you coming on here and hearing.
So I have one thing to add.
Oh yeah.
Is we have one friend and supporter that she says, I always listen to Lem on his podcast, and maybe one day I'll get to hear you guys. So a little shout out to Kay. Hello, we made it.
Hi, Kay. Hopefully one day you'll get to visit. And if you do, make sure you stop by and say hi. So actually, you know what? Let me know and we'll set this whole thing up and we can have you on the podcast and you can talk about the homes.
Wait.
Yeah.
You didn't know it was going there.
Yeah. Okay, I know you're listening. Let's do it. Let's do that. No, it's been really great. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And yeah. Anyway, thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. If you guys enjoyed this podcast or if you have any thoughts, if you want to share that, definitely leave those in the comments below. Or you can email us at podcast@maf.org. And you can also go to maf.org/podcast to watch more episodes. So yeah, really appreciate you guys. And we'll see you next month.